Good morning, and welcome to another week of Journey with Christ. I'm your host, Mark Mitchell, preaching minister here at the Park Avenue Church of Christ in Charleston, West Virginia. And I'm joined, not as usual, but for a couple weeks, by Sean Patrick. How you doing there, buddy?
I'm doing good.
I know, you get into a rhythm where you keep saying the same thing, and for a split second, I was like, I can't say it as usual.
I know it's
Steve is and Susie are out of town, and Sean has agreed to come on here and to take the brunt of me, because normally I have, I call Steve my resident expert. Sean and I are not even going to pretend we're experts.
not even the realm of an expert.
No. We're still working on our I guess you would say, Eagle Scout. We're still working on our patches.
I'm in the Cub Scout range anyway. But I told Steve that he was saying, "Are you going to replace me?" I was like, "There's no replacing Steve."
No, there's no replacing Steve. And in some ways, the world is better that there is only one.
That there is only one Steve. Yeah, he's. I love watching you guys, and I really don't want to watch myself. So I was like, but I really enjoy watching you guys, and I really enjoyed these series that you guys have put together.
The nice thing about doing this, and today we have a little bit a unique topic, but the nice thing about it is we can talk about things that maybe we don't always talk about. And secondly, we can talk about things and have differing viewpoints and importances on certain topics. Because you and I both know, Sean, today we live in a world that if someone disagrees with another person, Katie bar the door. It's like you've spit into their soup or something, So it is good to talk about things, and actually, I'm going to bring up one that I think is that for a lot of people this is not controversial. I'm going to say differing opinion. I told Sean that I gave him some verses, but I didn't give him this until he got here. I was going to answer the question. We were going to discuss the question: is nature or nurture the determining factor of any child or that turns into adult? What makes a child good, or what makes a child bad? And does it fall to the parents, or is the parents off the hook? What is it? And we've got all kinds of verses in the Bible that give various elements of that. We got Proverbs: train up a child in the way he should go, and when he gets older, he will not depart from it. Sound advice. But I've got two brothers. We were all trained by the same two parents. We're not none of us are in the same place or same area. Neither one of us.
No, it's the same with me and my brother. We had a mother who was the best mom you could think. Mm-hmm. We were very blessed. Not only that, we had a wonderful family, and you couldn't ask for a better family, a better mom, but yet still raised the right way. And I'm speaking of me and not on my brothers, but on me, I still veered the wrong way.
Me too. My mother, as I've say sometimes to people, she just She was a saint, and she was the most devoted woman of God that I've ever met or known to that extent. Of course, I knew her, so. But at the same time, I could see the frustration in her eyes when she was trying to raise 3 boys. And I'm not kidding you. Our last name is Mitchell, and you have to know my family to appreciate what exactly that means. I'm sure Mom had, if she could have seen in the future, she would have rethought her choices in picking Dad, because we were boys. I mean, we were full-fledged boys, and we were harmless. I mean, we didn't go out and kill dogs or cats or things of that nature, but we were rough.
Yeah.
And anybody who's ever, when you've raised children, you see it. I've raised daughters, and not anywhere near like what boys are, I don't think. But at the same time, it's just a different set of problems. Which, again, brings us up to the question. Is a child the way they are because that's how they were born or how they were trained? It's just, and I'll start off with this, and then I'm going to let you talk some. My dad and I, when I was probably 17 years old, we had an argument. And he asked me the question, was it nature or nurture? But I was adamant. It was nurture. You're to blame. You're to blame. I mean, you didn't raise me right. It's your fault I'm this way. And he looked at me, shook his head, and said, no. He said, you need to read the Bible. And I said, well, I didn't see that in there anywhere. He goes, well, then you're not looking. But it just seemed to me that all my traits were learned behaviors. Much like a lot of people will say, I learned to be that way. And you think that till you look deeply. Don't you think?
Yeah. It's a mixed question, because I could see some people being brought up the wrong way, going the wrong way. But like I said, I told you about my family, and I still veered the wrong way. I think if you look at it, just being a child, when a child is a child, and their main thought is me. Mine.
Yeah. When a 2-year-old learns to set territorial boundaries to everyone else in the house, and they confiscate something, maybe it doesn't belong to them, but they claim it as it's mine. Where does that come from? They didn't learn that from someone.
No.
That was already there. And that's an interesting point to be. Thank you for reminding me of that, because I'm still to this day. I can claim something in the refrigerator and say, that's mine. Don't you dare eat that, to my wife or whoever happens to be in that house.
Yeah. Well, I truly believe we're inherently selfish. And the reason is everything is from my perspective. Everything I see, everything I do, it's about me. And it took me a long time to learn that
it's not all about me.
It's not all about
like
me.
The Max Lucado book he wrote, it's not all about me.
And it's true. And and it takes a long time. And if you look at the world today, that's one of the inherited problems. Is you had you had good sermons and you were talking about freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is like in America, is the freedom of what? The freedom here is to be what you want to be. And when you think of that, when they're saying is the freedom to do what you want to do, to be who you want to be.
But you're responsible for that, that choice.
Exactly. And
you're free to choose, not free to blame.
Exactly. And it's, but yeah, the biggest problem I see with myself is that it was about me.
Mm-hmm.
And that I was selfish probably most of all my life until, a reckoning came and it made me look at what the issue was. And it wasn't anybody else. It was myself. And
yeah, you're exactly right. And, I'm not really sure, now I'm just going to be speaking for myself, that I ever get completely away from that. I honestly feel it's almost a default place because you literally have to concentrate to think it's not all about me, because at a flip of the switch I can turn and it's all about me. It is a full-time reminder, Mark. People don't live to please you. This is, everybody is gives an account for their actions. You need to make sure you're giving an account for your actions.
Yeah.
How do you handle things? And we have today, we're looking at a world that I'm going to say is probably 6-7 generations in of this selfish me attitude that I would say began to spring out of the late 50s, early 60s. Was, after world wars were over, it's amazing what happened in America, and we became very self-centered.
Yeah.
And we began to look at the world. I mean, it wasn't a turn of a switch. I don't want anybody to misinterpret that. But it was a gradual of thinning out the idea that we were in this together kind of mentality, as opposed to now it's all about me, make me happy. I know that in my generation, the 70s, it really took on a whole new reality with the sexual revolution, peace, love, and whatever the other banter is in that saying. But it was all about if it feels good, do it.
Yeah.
It was all about me.
When you were talking about the default setting, there was an author, and his name was David Foster Wallace.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've heard it, but
Mm-hmm.
he gave a baccalaureate speech it's called This Is Water.
Mm-hmm.
And if nobody here who's listening to this has never heard it, go to YouTube and listen to it, because
Absolutely.
it's fantastic.
And he was an atheist.
He was an atheist, but you could tell
He reasons some things out.
Someone called it being haunted by transcendence. He was an atheist. I don't think he believed in, but he knew there was something more than what reality was trying to give you.
Yeah, more cars, bigger houses, popularity, wealth, all these things will leave you empty.
But he was talking about when it comes to self, the way we look at things, he called it our default setting. And it's easy to go to your default setting and just look at yourself and everything. It's affecting you, and it's all about you. And the funny thing, he starts out with that the story where he says there's these two young fish and they're swimming along, and here an older fish comes by and says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish go by and say, "What the heck is water?" And what he was trying to put out there is that sometimes the most obvious things are like the hardest things to see and talk about.
Mm-hmm.
and the world around us, and if we don't open our eyes and look, you don't get to see the things that are happening around you that are happening every day if you're caught in that self all the time.
Yeah, you pay no attention to the neighbor down the road, the circumstances of the world that you're in. All you care about is, am I being made to feel, do I feel happy?
Yeah.
Am I happy? We're going to use as a jumping off point here some scripture from Isaiah chapter 1. And I was just doing this from memory when I sent you the thing, but I should have said to you, read. Of course, you probably read the whole chapter.
Yeah,
so.
I did.
But I want to read verses 5 and 6, and tell me what your first immediate response is. Now, this is Isaiah chapter 1, verses 5 and 6. Why should you be beaten anymore? Why do you persist in rebellion? Your whole head is injured, your whole heart afflicted. From the sole of your foot to the top of your head there is no soundness, only wounds and welts and open sores, not cleansed or bandaged or soothed with olive oil. That is a unique description of a person's condition, don't you think?
It's, I don't really see it as, I don't see it like as, literal, but as, they're, how do you say, it's, when God talks about the heart,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the time, the hardening of the heart, and how
It's described in a physical element, but it's actually speaking to a spiritual condition.
Exactly, and that's kind of what I see here.
Absolutely.
They're spiritually, from the top of their head to the bottom of their feet. All it is just open wounds and welts and sores, and it could be bandaged and soothed, but it's just sitting there like in their continual open.
I've been reading a book by Edward Fudge called Divine Rescue. And he goes into this book and goes through a lot of narratives. But one thing that he brought out, and you know me, I've been studying Isaiah here recently, speaking to what Isaiah is talking about in the very first chapter of his letter, or his book, that God, as a prophet, he's describing the condition which he sees out and about. Now, Isaiah, from the beginning, only sees it in the people that he's looking at. It isn't until we get to Isaiah chapter 6 that he says, oh, it's me too. But in the beginning, what he's saying is that all human beings, there is a condition in them that is, you have to talk about. Their whole head is injured. Your whole heart is afflicted. In other words, might be saying, you're damaged property, buddy, and you don't even recognize it. You don't even see it. Your brain, your head, it can't think right. Your heart, it's afflicted. What's it inflicted with? Me, selfish attitudes. It's all about me.
Yeah.
From the sole of your foot to the top of your head, there is no soundness. In other words, there's nothing about you that makes any sense. A sound argument or a sound idea is an idea that has merit, makes sense, But Isaiah writes that you can't find soundness in human beings, in human nature. There's nothing there. It's kind of funny. Well, it's not funny, but in the first 6 chapters of Genesis 1, there's a good time span that happens. And in Genesis 6, says God looks upon the earth and says, is sorry he made these human beings. He can't find any redeeming quality in any of them except one person, Noah.
Yeah, I think he said from birth, all their thoughts are evil.
Yeah, all they want to do is whatever they can do. There's no law, there's no accounting, and their human nature is the most vile thing. Left unchecked, what would the world look like today had Jesus not come? I mean, I think we would be living in the same kind of circumstance, maybe worse.
Oh, it would be worse.
Because we have all kinds of technology stuff now that we can just destroy one another. And yet, we will have this idea, and I don't know where it comes from, that, well, basically all human beings are good. No, they're not. No, they are not. The only way, as the proverb writer put, it takes training to override the operating system that's in our bodies. I mean, it's take a computer. They got to put a lot of patches in those things sometimes to get them to work, especially if you got a Windows operating system one. But we as humans, God had to institute certain things just to get us to this point. It's just amazing to me.
Yeah. I really liked when I started reading verse 2. He said, Hear me, you heavens, listen, earth. I reared children and brought them up, but they have rebelled against me. The ox knows its master, the donkey its owner's manager, but Israel does not know, my people do not understand. The ox, the bull, it knows its master. It knows when it sees, and he knows, and even like the donkey, it knows the owner. And when they attach the stuff to the donkey, maybe to ride it, it knows exactly what it wants, and he knows where to go.
Whether he does it or not, because donkeys can be just as hard-headed as human beings, or actually, humans can be even more hard-headed than a donkey.
And even if you could use a horse, they understand what the owner wants from them.
Mm-hmm.
But God says Israel doesn't know, doesn't understand.
It takes us all the way back to Genesis with Adam and Eve, and one of the things that I read out of this book by Edward Fudge was this idea of just exactly what God was telling them when they ate to not eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A lot of people just look at it as a specific rule. Don't eat from the tree. Don't eat the fruit. But Edward Fudge goes even a little bit deeper, and he says it's even more than that. The rule was there as an object lesson for them to understand. Choose to listen to me instead of choosing to make up your own choices, as far as it related to what is right and what is wrong. Because your choices of what is right and what is wrong will kill you. You will die. And sure enough, Adam and Eve died because they decided. Satan, of course, presented them a case that allowed them to rationally choose, to give reason for their choice. Oh, we can be just like God, so let's eat the fruit. But in doing so, they brought about a sickness that now permeates every living human being that follows them. Edward Fudge wrote that in that first instance, they did not feel the sting of sin and death. But as soon as they sinned, they felt the sting, because all of a sudden they felt shame, they felt fear, and they were doing everything they could to come up with acceptable reasoning for their choices.
It's his fault.
It is his fault.
It's her fault.
Her fault, and then
For the snake.
poor snake. Yeah, and I don't know why this is sometimes so hard for us. Now, I understand that for those who don't believe in God, this would not move them to this line of reasoning. But as those who believe in God, they really need to get this reasoning worked out. Because even today, Sean, I sometimes make choices that I'm still every now and then eating from going over and grabbing that piece of fruit of knowledge of good and evil and trying to make it work for me. Come up with my own rules.
Happens all the time. It's a constant battle.
Yeah. I mean, we've got division among churches because somebody's got certain rules that make other churches, they can't come, or they can't be a part of that. And we got rules, we've got all kinds of things. Don't get me wrong, I'm talking about things that are that you could have an honest discussion about. But God gives us insight into things. Like, I know how much you love the Sermon on the Mount, how the Sermon on the Mount sets an idea of what life is supposed to look like. And if it doesn't look like, then you need to be examining that life, because that's what God wants. That's what God wants.
Yeah. When you were going over the book of John on Wednesday night, there was a verse that stuck in my head. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the Spirit trying to tell me something, but it's when Pilate was talking to Jesus, and Jesus says, "Anyone who follows me follows truth." And Pilate says, "Well, what's truth?" And it just kind of ends right there, and it kind of grabbed me, and I'm like, there's truth, and then there's deception. And
that's a good way to put that.
There's two different roads. You got truth and you have deception. Jesus comes and he's the truth. He's showing the world what the truth is. And Pilate, knowing that Jesus is innocent, and you could tell by the way he's bumbling through trying to figure out a way to...
He's doing everything he can not to do this.
He doesn't understand what truth is. He can't grasp the truth.
Well, he can't see the value in that version of truth that Jesus is presenting, and you're exactly right. He's looking for anything because maybe deep down he glimpses as possibly this could be truth, but he can't see for sure, which is inevitable. That's why one of my favorite verses or topics that Paul talks about, 2 Corinthians chapter 2, 3, and 4. He talks about the blind state of human nature. The fact that we are all blind until there is only one moment that clarifies our blindness, and that's Jesus. There is no other moment where soundness, as Isaiah writes about, actually comes into contact with us until Jesus comes. Because up until that point, everyone by nature is capable of some of the worst atrocities that humankind has ever seen. Now, you can temper human conditions by training. I mean, I've often wondered, with my heart the way it was, had I not been raised by Kenneth and Joan Mitchell, what would I have been like? Because I had a really selfish heart. It is hard to tell what I would have been capable of doing. Because, at least with them, I was constrained and tempered to a degree by the ideas and concepts by which they explained to me and taught me. And it wasn't until I was older that I looked upon those lessons and learned and says, wow. Sort of like the, what was I thinking moments,
Yeah.
you know?
100%. And you see it today with families that, you know, a vicious cycle. Their parents doing whatever and they go to jail, then the kids go. A lot of the kids are going to follow what their parents do to a degree, at least at the beginning, because they trust them. And if this is what they see, a lot of times they mimic what they see.
And you bring up a very good point in the fact it's more of what they see than more of what they hear.
Yeah.
You know, you could tell somebody, now be nice, don't steal. But they see you going out the grocery store and cheating a man somehow. I don't know, it may be you didn't pay him everything he owed, or you told him you gave him 2 20s and you gave him a 20 and a 10. You know, little things. We learn more from watching than we do from hearing. And boy, now I learned a lot from listening to my mom and dad, but I learned a lot more from watching the life that they lived, because I knew there was boundaries. Didn't keep me from trying to get across them, but I knew they were there, and I can't imagine what it would have been like if I'd have had no boundaries. If there would have been no outer limit there that I could go to, because who knows what I would have been capable of doing.
Yeah, and I see that in Isaiah is they're still sacrificing to God. They're still fasting for God, but what they're doing and what God sees is two different things.
In fact, a little bit later, he says, I don't even want your sacrifices.
Yeah.
I don't even want your offerings. They make me sick.
I remember reading that, I was like, wow. But if I'm sacrificing to God but doing the exact opposite of what he wants, what's the point of what I'm doing?
No wonder he looks at us and goes like, you go back to Genesis 6 where God looks out over and says, what am I going to do with these humans? I'm just going to start over. Destroys, and well, he destroys the present circumstance of the world in order to recreate it yet again. What the world has become, to make right, or to start to make right what went wrong.
Yeah, we think about being bad now. How bad was it then? I mean, I can't even fathom. But yeah, it's you're talking about seeing, and I think, especially in churches today, if you talk about mercy, but if someone goes into a church and people aren't merciful, then what's the point of them going to that church?
Then when you go to talk about, turn the other cheek when someone strikes you, I'm like, well, why? No, I can retaliate. Nobody here. Mercy that's just an idea. It has to be real. All these understandings are real, And I know I've said it from the pulpit, I don't know if I've said it from here, but God had an idea of what life should look like. And if we would only listen to Him, we would have the life that He's always intended us to have. Does that mean that it's going to be a perfect life? No, because we're in an imperfect world now. Maybe, well, we have a future that's promised that we will have that perfect world someday.
Yeah.
But right now, we're trying to live by the rules and ideas and understandings of what Jesus brings about to us, in order that we can begin to have that eternal life that we so long for, where there is the concept of they're good all the way to the core. But we'll never shed that on this. As long as we got this flesh, we're never gonna get rid of it.
And when we were going over in class, we were doing Colossians, and in Colossians 3, there's this little paragraph where Paul's talking about how we should live, what should we stay away from it, and talking about how we deal with each other. And at the very end, he says, "Forgive your brother as God forgave you."
Yeah.
And it took me a while when I looked at that, and that one kind of hit me, like some verses kind of just hit you hard. If we don't grasp the forgiveness that was to us, the Sermon on the Mount and what Jesus laid out is always going to feel impossible, because if we don't know the gravity of what God did and the forgiveness that we have, and if it's almost like the woman who came, we talked about it Sunday, the woman who came in and cried on Jesus' feet. And Jesus says, those who
been forgiven much,
they're given much, are going to love much.
That's right.
And if you think that you have this, God forgave me, but I've got
just a little bit.
He got rid of that little bit of stuff I had in my past.
You're not gonna love much.
No,
and you're right. There is a realization that has to happen in every one of us, that we have to see the overwhelming nature that we have to sin. That's why I told you one time, I really hated to keep on reading my Bible, because every time I kept reading it, I kept finding, well, man, you're a mess.
Yeah.
And it just kept getting worse. I never got to a point where I was like, hey, I made it. No, I never got there. It just only every day I read something and I'm like, you mean I got that problem too? I'm tired of you coming to you, Dr.
Like,
God.
Yeah, did they write this about me?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's and the Pharisees, and it's funny, in verse 4 he calls them a brood of evildoers.
I know.
And I'm like, and you would think, and the funny thing is, the Pharisees at the time were considered righteous men.
That's right.
And people looked up to them. But obviously God doesn't think so as much, but he called them all a brood of evildoers. And but what I was meaning by that with the forgiveness is, I just feel like if we don't grasp that part, it's always going to feel legalistic. Mm-hmm. Like, well, I've got to be good to my neighbor, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, or I've got to check all the boxes.
Yeah, you get to get the list right in line.
And the woman who cried on Jesus' feet and wiped her tears, and when he gave her what she wanted, what she was desperately looking for, which was forgiveness.
And forgiveness and acceptance.
Acceptance, you know.
You love me in spite of how bad I've been?
Where everybody in the room's taking 3 steps back because they don't want to be unclean.
Yeah.
Jesus said, and anything Jesus asked would be almost a gift.
You want me? I'll do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a good way. I mean,
yeah.
I will give up what the life that I once had, because I can't imagine this.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to call it quits right there, Sean, because we've gone about 40 minutes. But we are so glad that you've tuned in. Is there anything else that you would like to make mention of while it's still on your mind before we close it up?
No, just continue to read, continue to pray. And continue to try to grow a little more and try to allow our hearts to be unhardened a little more each day. And
absolutely. And remember, you are the way you are because of the sin that's in this world, and in us by nature because of being a descendant of Adam. All of us are going to deal with that battle. But there is good news. And the good news which Jesus kept saying all along was, I am here to fix your problem. On behalf of Sean and I will wish you a great week, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.